This place isn't a daycare for tired single dads. Dr. Preston Hale's voice carried across the corridor as Cole Hadley walked past, eyes fixed on the floor. The young doctors snickered behind their clipboards. In the gleaming halls of the military hospital, they watched him mop floors and file paperwork, the tasks no one else wanted. Just another middle-aged nurse who wandered into the wrong profession. But when a wounded SEAL commander was wheeled through those doors, barely clinging to life, something shifted. The doctors rushed in. Cole was shoved aside. And then, in the chaos of monitors screaming and hands trembling, the commander's eyes fluttered open. She looked past every surgeon in the room. Her gaze found him, the nurse they had mocked, and with what little strength remained, she raised her hand in a military salute. The room fell silent, because that salute carried a debt none of them could understand. The alarm on Cole Hadley's phone went off at 5 in the morning, the same time it had gone off every day for the past 3 years. He lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling of his small bedroom, listening to the silence of the apartment. Then he rose, his feet finding the cold floor, and began the routine that had become as familiar as breathing. First, the kitchen. He moved quietly, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator, assembling a lunch that would make his daughter smile. A sandwich cut into triangles, the way she liked it. Apple slices arranged in a fan pattern, a note tucked inside, written in his careful handwriting. "You are braver than you believe. Love, Dad." By 5:45, the lunch was packed, breakfast was warming on the stove, and Cole was in the shower, washing away the fatigue that never quite left his bones. He was 42 years old, with the kind of face that told stories without saying a word. Lines around his eyes from too many sleepless nights. Hands rough from work that had nothing to do with keyboards or golf clubs. And on his left forearm, a scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow, usually hidden beneath his sleeves. When colleagues asked about it, he always gave the same answer, delivered with a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Industrial accident," he would say. "Long time ago." No one ever pressed further. No one cared enough to ask. Redwood Military Medical Center rose against the morning sky like a monument to precision and privilege. It was no ordinary hospital. It was a temple of military medicine, where young surgeons with Ivy League degrees and family connections ruled like minor gods. They walked with their chins lifted, their voices carrying the weight of inherited confidence. The hierarchy here was absolute. Doctors were royalty, specialists were nobility, and nurses were servants. Useful, perhaps. Necessary, even. But never respected. Never seen. Cole arrived at 6:30, changed into his navy blue scrubs, and reported for duty. His assignment, as always, was the work no one else wanted. Restocking supply closets, filing paperwork, mopping floors, changing bedpans. He moved through these tasks with meticulous care, never rushing, never cutting corners. Every sheet was folded precisely. Every supply was counted twice. Every patient, no matter how minor their needs, received his full attention. It was not the career he had imagined for himself, but it was the career that let him be home every night for his daughter, and that was all that mattered. Dr. Preston Hale stood at the nurses' station, surrounded by his usual entourage of residents and fellows. He was 34 years old, with the kind of polished appearance that came from a lifetime of privilege. His father was a retired admiral. His grandfather had been a decorated general. Preston Hale had never known what it meant to struggle, to doubt, to wonder where the next meal would come from. He wore that certainty like armor. When Cole walked past, pushing a cart loaded with fresh linens, Hale looked up with the expression of a man noticing an insect on his windshield. Hadley. The name was spoken like a dismissal. Cole stopped, turned, and waited. Hale didn't bother to look at him directly. The supply closet in Wing C is a mess. I need it reorganized by noon. And make sure the inventory sheets are on my desk. I don't have time to chase down your paperwork." Cole nodded once. "Yes, Dr. Hale." He turned to continue on his way, but Hale's voice followed him, pitched just loud enough for the surrounding residents to hear. "You know, I still don't understand what you're doing here, Hadley. A man your age, starting over as a nurse. Most people would have realized by now that they don't belong." The residents exchanged amused glances, a few of them poorly concealing their smirks. Cole's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes, something old and deep, quickly suppressed. "Just trying to make a living, Dr. Hale, like everyone else." Hale laughed, a sharp sound that echoed off the walls. "A living? In this place?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice to something intimate and cruel. "This place isn't a daycare for tired single dads who couldn't hack it anywhere else. We treat the most elite soldiers in the country here. Navy SEALs, Special Forces, Delta operators. This is the major leagues, Hadley. And you." He looked Cole up and down with undisguised contempt. "You're still playing t-ball." The laughter that followed was soft, but unmistakable. Cole said nothing. He simply turned and continued walking, his cart rattling quietly against the polished floor. But if anyone had been watching closely, and one person was, they might have noticed things that didn't fit the picture of a tired single dad who had wandered into the wrong profession. The way his hands gripped the cart handle with controlled stillness, rather than trembling anger. The way his eyes swept the corridor with practiced awareness, cataloging exits and angles. The way he checked on a patient's vitals as he passed. Not the slow, methodical check of a floor nurse, but the rapid, precise assessment of someone trained to evaluate casualties in seconds. Wendy Colton noticed. She was 26, a junior nurse who had been at Redwood for just over a year. She had learned to keep her head down, to avoid drawing Dr. Hale's attention, to survive in this ecosystem of egos and hierarchies. But she had also learned to watch. And what she saw in Cole Hadley didn't match what everyone else seemed to believe. The questions he asked about trauma protocols weren't the questions of someone learning. They were the questions of someone comparing methods. The way he moved through crowded spaces, always aware of who was behind him. The scar on his arm that he said was from an industrial accident, but that looked to her trained eye like something else entirely. She filed these observations away, saying nothing. But she watched. That night, Cole's shift ended at 8. He drove home through quiet streets, his mind already turning toward the small apartment, where the only person who mattered was waiting. When he unlocked the door, the living room was dark, except for the glow of a single lamp. Curled up on the couch, fighting sleep with the determination only a child possesses, was his daughter, Ruthie. She was 9 years old, with tangled brown hair and her mother's eyes. In her hands was a glass of milk that had long since gone cold. The moment she heard the door, Ruthie sat up, her face breaking into a smile that could have lit up the entire building. "Daddy!" She launched herself off the couch and into Cole's arms. He caught her easily, lifting her up and holding her close. She smelled like strawberry shampoo and the macaroni and cheese he had left for her dinner. "Hey, sweetheart," he murmured into her hair. "Why are you still awake? It's way past your bedtime." Ruthie pulled back, studying his face with serious intensity. "I was waiting for you. I had to ask you something important." Cole carried her to the couch and sat down, settling her on his lap. "Okay, what's so important it couldn't wait until morning?" Ruthie was quiet for a moment, tracing a pattern on his scrub top with her finger. When she spoke, her voice was small. "Daddy, do you like your job? Are you happy when you go to work?" The question hit him harder than he expected. He had tried so hard to shield her from the weight he carried, from the small humiliations that piled up like stones. But children see everything. They feel everything. Why do you ask, honey? Ruthie shrugged, not meeting his eyes. You always look tired when you come home, and sometimes you look sad, like someone was mean to you. Cole felt something tighten in his chest. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. I'm okay, sweetheart. Work is just work. But you know what makes me happy? He tapped her nose gently. Coming home to you. Every single night. That's what I work for. That's what makes everything worth it. Ruthie smiled, but the worry didn't entirely leave her eyes. Daddy, today at school, we had to draw pictures of our families. She climbed off his lap and ran to her backpack, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. She smoothed it carefully before handing it to him. Cole looked down at the drawing. 2 figures, a tall one with brown hair wearing blue scrubs, and a small one with pigtails, holding the tall one's hand. Above them, in wobbly letters, My dad is a superhero. Cole stared at the drawing for a long moment, something burning behind his eyes. Ruthie, he whispered, his voice thick. This is beautiful. She climbed back onto his lap, snuggling against his chest. Mrs. Patterson asked what superpower you have. I told her you don't need superpowers because you're real. Real is better than superpowers. Cole held her tight, feeling the weight of everything he had given up and everything he had gained. I love you, Ruthie. She yawned, her eyes already drooping. Love you too, Daddy, more than all the stars. He carried her to bed, tucking the covers around her small frame. On the wall above her bed, among the glow-in-the-dark stars and paper butterflies, he saw it, the drawing, now pinned in a place of honor. My dad is a superhero. Cole stood there for a moment, watching his daughter sleep. Then he turned off the light and walked to the kitchen to finish preparing her lunch for tomorrow, the routine beginning again. The next morning came too quickly. Cole was at the hospital before 6, moving through his duties, with the quiet efficiency that had become his trademark. He was checking inventory in the supply closet when the overhead speakers crackled to life. Code red. Trauma unit. All available personnel to Trauma Bay 1. Code red. The word sent an electric current through the building. Code red meant incoming casualties. Serious ones. Cole finished his count and moved toward the trauma unit, his pace measured, but alert. By the time he reached the bay, the corridor was already crowded with doctors and nurses, all of them buzzing with nervous energy. Dr. Preston Hale stood at the center, barking orders like a general preparing for battle. His white coat was pristine, his expression a mixture of excitement and authority. This was his element. This was where he believed he belonged. Listen up, Hale's voice cut through the noise. We have critical incoming. SEAL team hit during an operation. Multiple casualties. The most severe is a commander. Chest trauma, possible internal bleeding. ETA 15 minutes. He scanned the assembled staff, his gaze landing on Cole with obvious disdain. I want only senior team in that bay. Hadley. He pointed directly at Cole. Stand aside. This case requires people with actual qualifications. A young resident smirked as he walked past Cole. Single dad should go home and cook soup for his kid, he muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Laughter rippled through the group. Cole said nothing, but he didn't leave. He positioned himself near the observation window, where he could see into the trauma bay without being in the way. A nurse was updating the patient information on the board near the entrance. Cole's eyes found the name automatically, the way they always scanned for details. Commander Audrey Shaw, SEAL team, critical condition. The name hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, the busy corridor seemed to fall away, replaced by sand and heat and the smell of blood. His hand found the wall, steadying himself. His other hand gripped the back of a nearby chair so hard his knuckles went white. In his mind, he saw her. Not the commander being rushed toward them now, but a younger woman, a lieutenant with fierce eyes and a jaw set against pain, a woman who had gripped his hand in the Afghan desert and made him promise not to let her die, a woman whose face he had never forgotten, even after 12 years. It couldn't be the same person. But even as the rational part of his mind tried to dismiss the connection, something deeper knew. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, seeing Ruthie's face on the screen, a photo from her school play last spring. The message was from Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor who watched Ruthie before and after school. She's asking if you'll be home for dinner tonight. What should I tell her? Cole looked at the phone, then at the trauma bay doors, then back at the phone. Through the window, he could see the medical team preparing. He could hear the distant thrum of the helicopter approaching. He typed his response slowly. Tell her, I'll try to be home. But tonight might be late. There's someone here who needs me. He paused, then added, Tell her I love her. He sent the message and slipped the phone back into his pocket. Then he pressed closer to the observation window, his heart pounding against his ribs. Whatever was about to happen, he needed to see. The helicopter landed 11 minutes later. The doors to the trauma bay burst open, and the gurney came through surrounded by flight medics, trailing IV lines, monitors beeping urgent warnings. The patient at its center was barely visible beneath the chaos of equipment and hands. Cole pressed against the glass, his trained eyes cutting through the confusion to find what mattered, and then he saw her. Commander Audrey Shaw was 40 years old now, her face harder and more weathered than the young lieutenant he remembered. But it was her. The same determined set of her jaw, the same fierce eyes, even closed, the same scar on her left temple, the one she had gotten from shrapnel before Cole had ever entered her life. She was intubated, her chest rising and falling with mechanical rhythm. Blood soaked the bandages on her torso. The monitors surrounding her told a grim story, heart rate dropping, blood pressure unstable. Something was very wrong. Cole watched as Dr. Hale and his team swarmed around the gurney. They moved with precision, but their focus was wrong. They were treating the visible wounds, the lacerations, the external bleeding, the obvious trauma. But Cole saw something they didn't. Something that made his blood run cold. The trachea was deviated, shifted to one side, pushed by pressure building in the chest cavity. The jugular veins were distended, bulging against the skin of her neck, and her breathing, even with the ventilator, showed a pattern that most doctors missed until it was too late. Paradoxical respiration. The signs were textbook clear to anyone who had seen them before. Tension pneumothorax, a collapsed lung with air building in the chest cavity, compressing the heart, cutting off circulation. If it wasn't treated within minutes, she would die. Not from her wounds, from the pressure crushing her heart. Cole didn't think. He moved. His hand was on the door before his mind caught up. He pushed into the trauma bay, ignoring the startled looks, ignoring protocol, ignoring everything except the woman on the table whose life was measured in seconds. Dr. Hale, his voice cut through the controlled chaos. Tension pneumothorax. She needs immediate decompression. Look at the tracheal deviation, the neck veins. Hale's head snapped toward him, his face flushing with rage. What the hell are you doing in here? Get out. Cole didn't back down. Her trachea is deviated to the left. Jugular veins are distended. She's showing paradoxical breathing even on the vent. You need to decompress now, or she's going to code. Shut up. Hale's voice was a whip crack. Who do you think you are? You're a nurse, a floor nurse. You mop floors and change bedpans. You don't get to walk into my trauma bay and tell me how to do my job. He turned to the security officer near the door. Get him out of here, now! A young resident stepped toward Cole, sneering. A nurse trying to teach doctors? Know your place, singledad. Hands grabbed Cole's arms, pulling him toward the door, but his eyes never left the monitors. The heart rate was dropping. 90, 85, 75. She's dying, Cole said, his voice steady despite the hands dragging him backward. Check the diagnosis. You have maybe 2 minutes. I said get him out! Hale roared. The door swung shut in Cole's face. He stood in the corridor, chest heaving, watching through the window as the team continued their work. The wrong work. The monitors continued their descent. 70, 65, 60. Cole's mind raced backward, 12 years and 8,000 miles, to a different place and a different time. The Afghan desert, 2014. He had been a combat medic then, assigned to support special operations units in Kandahar province. The ambush had come without warning. Gunfire erupting from 3 directions, chaos and screaming, and the smell of cordite. When the shooting stopped, he had found her. A young lieutenant, barely 30, with a bullet wound in her abdomen and blood pooling beneath her. He had worked on her for 4 hours, alone, waiting for extraction that kept getting delayed. He had used everything he had, his training, his supplies, his voice. He talked to her constantly, keeping her conscious, keeping her fighting. He asked her about her family. She said she didn't have one yet. He told her he didn't either. She had grabbed his hand, her grip surprisingly strong for someone who had lost so much blood. My name is Shaw, she had said. If I survive this, I owe you my life. He had told her she was going to survive. He had told her she was going to have that family someday. He had told her to stay with him, stay awake, stay alive. And she had. The helicopter had finally come, and he had loaded her aboard, and she had looked at him one last time before the morphine took her under. He never saw her again. Until now. The monitor alarm changed. A new tone, more urgent. Cole looked through the window. Heart rate 52, 48, 45. Commander Shaw was dying, and no one in that room was going to save her. Cole looked at his hands, the same hands that had kept her alive 12 years ago, the same hands that had held his daughter when she was born, that had buried his wife, that had rebuilt a life from nothing. The hands of a man who had given up everything to be a father. The hands of a man who had sworn to do no harm. He made his choice. The doors burst open as Cole strode back into the trauma bay. Hale spun around, his face contorted with fury. Security! I want this man! Cole didn't stop. He moved past the startled nurses, past the frozen residents, straight to the equipment tray. His hand closed around a 14-gauge needle. This is insubordination, Hale shouted. This is the end of your career. I will have you arrested. I will. Cole found the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, right side. The exact point he had been trained to locate in darkness, under fire, with bullets cracking overhead. He positioned the needle at the correct angle and pushed it through. The hiss of escaping air was immediate and loud. The pressure that had been crushing Shaw's heart released in an instant. Her chest rose more fully. The monitors began to climb. 52, 58, 65, 70, 75. The room was utterly silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor, now settling into a stable rhythm. Cole stepped back, the needle still in place, his hand steady, his face expressionless. He had just ended his career. He had just saved her life. Again, Dr. Hale stared at him, his face cycling through emotions, rage, disbelief, something that might have been fear. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. You just ended your career, Hadley. You understand that? You're finished. I'll have your license. I'll make sure you never work in medicine again. Cole looked at him, then looked down at Commander Shaw. Her color was returning. Her vitals were stabilizing. She was going to live. I know, he said quietly. And then he turned and walked out of the trauma bay, feeling every eye on his back. Near the door, Wendy Colton stood frozen, her phone held low at her side. She had recorded everything. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of paperwork and accusations. Cole was suspended pending investigation. His badge was confiscated. He was told to go home and wait. He went home. He made dinner for Ruthie. He helped her with her homework and tucked her into bed. And then he sat alone in the dark living room, staring at the drawing on the wall. My dad is a superhero. He wasn't sure about that anymore. But the following evening, he received a call. Commander Shaw was awake, and she was asking for him. Cole arrived at Redwood feeling like a man walking to his own execution. The security guard gave him a curious look. Word had clearly spread, but he was allowed through. He made his way to the private room where Shaw was recovering, paused outside the door to gather himself, then knocked and entered. She was sitting up in bed, IVs trailing from her arm, monitors quietly tracking her vitals. Her face was pale but alert, and when she saw him, something shifted in her expression. Recognition. Not casual recognition. Something deeper. Something that reached across 12 years and 8,000 miles. "Close the door," she said, her voice rough from the intubation. Cole closed the door and stood at the foot of her bed, waiting. Shaw studied him for a long moment. Her eyes moved to his hands, to the old scar on his forearm. "I know you," she said slowly. "I've been trying to figure out from where since I woke up. Your face is older. But your hands..." She trailed off, her gaze fixed on those scarred forearms. "I never forget hands, not when they kept me alive." Cole felt the past and present collide in his chest. "Kandahar," he said quietly. 2014. You were a lieutenant. First deployment." Shaw's breath caught. For a moment, the hardened commander disappeared, replaced by someone younger, more vulnerable. "The ambush," she whispered. "I took a round to the gut. I should have died in that desert." "You kept trying to give me your dog tags," Cole said. "You wanted your mom to have them. I told you that you were going to give them to her yourself." A ghost of a smile crossed Shaw's face. "You made me talk for 4 hours about my family, my dreams, everything I wanted but didn't have yet. I thought you were just distracting me from dying." "I was," Cole admitted, "but I also wanted you to have something to fight for." Shaw's eyes glistened. "You asked me about family. I said I didn't have one. You said you didn't either." She paused. "And then you told me something I've never forgotten. You said, 'Then you have to live, so you can have that family someday.'" The silence stretched between them, heavy with years and choices and roads not taken. "I never got that family," Shaw said finally. "The Navy became my family. The SEALs became my family. But I never forgot what you said. And I never forgot the man who kept me alive long enough to hear it." She looked at him with new eyes. "Why are you here, Cole? A combat medic with your skills, working as a floor nurse, taking abuse from surgeons who couldn't field dress a wound if their lives depended on it?" Cole was quiet for a moment. "My wife died," he said. 8 years ago. Complications during childbirth. I was deployed when it happened. By the time I got home, she was gone." His voice remained steady, but something in his eyes betrayed the cost of those words. "My daughter survived. Ruthie. She's 9 now." "I've heard the nurses talking about her," Shaw said softly. "They say you're always rushing home." Cole nodded. "After my wife died, I couldn't stay in the service. I couldn't be deployed to the other side of the world while my daughter grew up without parents. So I got out. Gave up everything. Started over." "They don't know who you are," Shaw said. "It wasn't a question. They don't know you were special operations. They don't know about the Bronze Star. They just see a middle-aged single dad who wandered into the wrong profession." Cole shrugged. "My military records aren't in my civilian file, and I didn't see the point in bringing it up. I just wanted to work, to provide for Ruthie, to be there for her every night. Shaw shook her head slowly. You gave up everything, your career, your identity, your pride, all so you could be a father. Cole met her eyes. I didn't give up anything. I chose what mattered most. The door opened without warning. Dr. Preston Hale strode in, followed by 2 hospital administrators in expensive suits. His face was set in hard lines, and in his hand was a folder. Cole's personnel file. Mr. Hadley, you were instructed to remain at home pending investigation. Your presence here is a direct violation of Dr. Hale. Shaw's voice cut through his words like a blade. Do you know who I am? Hale paused, his rehearsed speech derailed. Commander Shaw. Of course. We're relieved that your surgery was successful. I wanted to personally assure you that the incident with this individual will be handled appropriately. Shaw's eyes went cold. The incident? You mean the incident where your entire team missed a textbook tension pneumothorax? Where you ignored a correct diagnosis because the person giving it wasn't wearing a white coat? Where this man saved my life while you threatened to have him arrested? The administrators exchanged nervous glances. Hale's face went pale. Commander, with all due respect, there are protocols. Shaw pushed herself upright in the bed, ignoring the pain that flickered across her face. I know about protocols, Dr. Hale. I've been following military protocols since before you graduated medical school. She turned to Cole, and something shifted in the room. The air itself seemed to change. Slowly, deliberately, Commander Audrey Shaw raised her right hand to her temple. The movement was difficult. Her body was still recovering from major trauma. But her arm was steady, her eyes were clear, and her hand formed a perfect military salute. The room froze. In military culture, subordinates salute superiors. When a superior officer salutes a subordinate, when a commander salutes an enlisted man, it carries weight that civilians cannot understand. It is the highest honor one warrior can give another. Shaw held the salute, her eyes locked on Cole's. This man saved my life. Twice. 12 years ago in a desert in Afghanistan, and yesterday in your operating room. Her voice carried to every corner of the room. If anyone in this hospital takes action against him, they will answer to me, and through me, to the United States Navy. Cole stood frozen, something burning in his chest. He did the only thing that felt right. He returned the salute. A simple gesture, a warrior's acknowledgement. Dr. Hale looked like he wanted to disappear. The administrators were already backing toward the door, and standing in the doorway, having slipped in unnoticed, Wendy Colton held her phone steady, recording everything. The following week brought an investigation that turned Redwood Military Medical Center upside down. Medical data was reviewed. Timelines were reconstructed. The truth emerged in stark, undeniable detail. Dr. Preston Hale and his team had missed the tension pneumothorax for 7 critical minutes. If Cole had not intervened, Commander Shaw would have died on that table. Cole's personnel file was opened, and the administrators discovered what had been hidden in plain sight. Staff Sergeant Cole Hadley, United States Army. Combat Medic, Special Operations. Bronze Star for Valor, awarded for actions in Afghanistan. Multiple commendations for saving lives under enemy fire. Honorably discharged 8 years ago, following the death of his wife. The hearing took place in a conference room on the hospital's administrative floor. Cole sat on one side of the table, alone. On the other side sat the hospital director, 2 board members, and a representative from the Navy Medical Corps. Dr. Hale was notably absent. He had been suspended pending his own investigation. The questions came rapid fire, but Cole answered them calmly, thoroughly, without embellishment. Yes, he had identified the tension pneumothorax. Yes, he had attempted to alert Dr. Hale. Yes, he had been removed from the trauma bay. Yes, he had returned and performed the needle decompression without authorization. Yes, he understood he had violated protocol. No, he would not do anything differently. And then Wendy Colton asked to speak. She stood before the panel, her voice steady despite her obvious nervousness. "I've worked with Mr. Hadley for 3 months," she said. "In that time, I've watched him do every task assigned to him without complaint. I've watched him treat patients with more care and attention than doctors who make 10 times his salary. I've watched him be mocked, dismissed, and humiliated by people who weren't fit to carry his equipment." She took a breath. "I didn't know about his military record until yesterday, but I knew something was different about him. The way he assessed patients, the way he moved, the way he asked questions that showed he understood trauma in ways the textbooks don't teach." She looked directly at the panel. "He never complained. He never defended himself. He never told anyone who he really was. He just did his job and went home to his daughter." Her voice grew stronger. "I've seen the data from Commander Shaw's case. Dr. Hale missed the diagnosis. His team missed the diagnosis. The only person who saw it was the man they were all laughing at. And when he tried to save her life, they threw him out." She paused. If that man hadn't walked back through those doors, Commander Shaw would be dead. And we'd be here today planning a memorial instead of an investigation. The room was silent. Wendy sat down, her hands shaking slightly. Cole looked at her and nodded once, a small gesture of gratitude. The panel deliberated for less than an hour. All charges against Cole were dropped. His suspension was lifted, and he was offered a new position: Head of Trauma Emergency Training, responsible for developing protocols and training staff in combat-relevant medical techniques. The hospital director delivered the news personally, along with an apology that seemed genuine. Cole listened, nodded, and made one request. "I need to be home by 7 every night," he said. "My daughter needs me for dinner, homework, and bedtime. If the position can accommodate that, I accept. If it can't, I'll go back to mopping floors." The director agreed without hesitation. That evening, Cole left work earlier than he had in months. The sun was still up when he pulled into the parking lot of his apartment building. He sat in the car for a moment, letting the events of the past week settle around him. Then he got out and walked toward home. Ruthie must have been watching from the window because the door flew open before he reached it. "Daddy, you're home early!" She ran into his arms, and he lifted her up, holding her tight. "Hey, sweetheart, I missed you." She pulled back, studying his face. "Mrs. Patterson said something happened at work. She said people were talking about you. Are you in trouble?" Cole carried her inside and sat down on the couch, settling her on his lap. "No, honey, I'm not in trouble. Actually, something good happened." Ruthie's eyes widened. "What? Tell me." Cole smiled. "Someone at the hospital said thank you. Someone I helped a long time ago." "Who?" Cole thought about how to explain it. "A soldier, a very brave woman. She got hurt, and I helped her. And today, she told everyone that I helped her." Ruthie considered this with the gravity of a 9-year-old philosopher. "Daddy, did anyone say thank you to you before?" The question caught him off guard. All those months of mockery, of being dismissed, of swallowing his pride. All those nights coming home to Ruthie's question. "Did anyone thank you today, Daddy?" And his answer, always the same. "You thank me every day, sweetheart. That's enough." But now, for the first time, he could say something different. "Yes, honey. Someone thanked me today." Ruthie's face lit up. "Really? Who?" Cole smiled. "An old friend. A very old friend." Ruthie snuggled against his chest. "I'm glad, Daddy. You deserve people saying thank you. Because you're the best daddy in the whole world." 1 week later, Cole received an invitation he didn't expect. The hospital was holding a small ceremony to formally recognize his new position and acknowledge his actions in saving Commander Shaw's life. He tried to decline, He had never been comfortable with attention, but the director insisted, and Cole sensed that refusing would cause more problems than attending. He arrived at the conference hall expecting a handful of administrators, maybe some polite applause, and a quick exit. What he found instead made him stop in the doorway. The room was packed. Nurses, doctors, orderlies, administrators, people he recognized, and people he didn't. Standing at the front, beside the podium, was Commander Audrey Shaw, out of her wheelchair, moving carefully but standing. And beside her, grinning like she had pulled off the surprise of her life, was Wendy Colton. The hospital director stepped to the microphone. "We're here today to recognize an extraordinary individual, someone who reminds us that excellence in medicine isn't about pedigrees or titles. It's about dedication, skill, and the courage to do what's right." He gestured toward Cole. Cole Hadley came to us as a nurse. What we didn't know was that he came with years of experience, saving lives in the most dangerous conditions on Earth. He gave up a decorated military career to raise his daughter alone. He never asked for recognition. He never complained about the work he was assigned. He simply did his job, every day, with excellence and humility. The director paused. Last week, Cole saw something that everyone else missed. When he tried to help, he was dismissed. When he persisted, he was threatened. And when he was thrown out, he came back anyway, because he knew that a woman's life depended on it. He turned to Cole. "For that courage and for your years of service to this country and to medicine, we are honored to present you with the Redwood Medal of Excellence." Applause filled the room. Cole stood frozen, overwhelmed. This wasn't what he wanted. This wasn't why he had done any of it. He had just wanted to do his job, go home to his daughter, live quietly. But as he looked around the room, he understood. This wasn't really about him. It was about showing everyone that heroes don't always wear white coats or carry impressive credentials. Sometimes they mop floors. Sometimes they file paperwork. Sometimes they go unnoticed for years, until the moment when everything depends on them. Commander Shaw stepped to the microphone. "I want to add something. 12 years ago, I was a young lieutenant dying in the Afghan desert. A medic I'd never met stayed with me for 4 hours, keeping me alive through nothing but skill and will. He told me about his dreams, the family he wanted, the life he hoped to build." She looked at Cole. "I learned yesterday that he built that life. He has a daughter who thinks he's a superhero." She smiled. And she's right. Shaw reached into her pocket and pulled out something small and metallic. Dog tags. Old, worn, familiar. "I've carried these for 12 years. They're the tags I tried to give you in that desert, when I was sure I was going to die. You wouldn't take them then." She walked to Cole and pressed the dog tags into his hand. "I want your daughter to have them, so she knows that her dad really is a hero, not because he wears a cape, because he never gives up on the people who need him." The doors at the back of the room opened. Wendy Colton walked in, leading a small figure by the hand. Ruthie's eyes were wide with wonder as she looked around the crowded room. When she spotted her father, her face broke into the brightest smile Cole had ever seen. "Daddy!" She ran through the crowd and threw herself into his arms. He caught her, lifted her, held her close. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" Ruthie giggled. "Miss Wendy said there was a party for you. She said I could come see." She looked around at all the people watching them. "Daddy, are all these people here for you?" Cole couldn't speak. His throat was too tight. Commander Shaw crouched down to Ruthie's level, wincing slightly. "You must be Ruthie. Your daddy has told me about you." Ruthie studied the uniformed woman with curious eyes. "Are you the soldier lady my daddy saved?" Shaw smiled. "Yes, I am. He saved my life twice." She reached out and gently touched Ruthie's cheek. "You're very lucky to have a daddy like him." Ruthie nodded seriously. I know, he's a superhero. But he says superheroes don't wear capes. They wear scrubs. Laughter rippled through the room. Shaw straightened up and did something unexpected. She raised her hand in a salute, not to Cole, but to Ruthie. Thank you for sharing your daddy with us. He's a hero to many people now, but I can tell he was your hero first. Ruthie beamed. Then she tugged on Cole's sleeve. Daddy, I made you a new picture. It has the soldier lady in it. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket and handed it to him. Cole unfolded it carefully. The drawing showed 3 figures: a tall man in blue scrubs, a small girl with pigtails, and a woman in a green uniform saluting. Above them, in Ruthie's careful handwriting, my dad is a superhero. And now everyone knows. Cole looked at the drawing, at his daughter, at Commander Shaw, at the room full of people who had once dismissed him and now looked at him with respect. You want to know a secret? He said softly to Ruthie. I'm not the hero here. He lifted her higher in his arms. You are. You're the reason I get up every morning, the reason I never give up, the reason I came back through those doors when everyone told me to stay out. Commander Shaw stepped forward one final time. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her hand in a salute to Cole, and then, one by one, others began to join her. Wendy Colton, the nurses he had worked beside, the doctors who had ignored him, even the administrators. Not a military salute. Most of them didn't know how. But a gesture of respect, of acknowledgement, of honor. Cole stood in the center of it all, his daughter in his arms, tears streaming down his face. Ruthie leaned close and whispered in his ear, Daddy, can we go home now? I want to show you my other drawings. He laughed, a real laugh, the first in longer than he could remember. Yes, sweetheart, let's go home. They walked out together, father and daughter, through the crowd that parted to let them pass. At the door, Cole paused and turned back. Thank you, he said simply. But the truth is, everything I did for her. He looked at Ruthie, who was already telling him about the butterfly she had seen at recess. She's my hero. Every single day. The walk home was quiet and peaceful. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and gold. Ruthie held her father's hand, swinging it back and forth. Daddy? At school, Tommy said heroes have to fight bad guys. But I said, that's not true. Some heroes just have to be there. Like you're always there for me. Cole squeezed her hand. That's exactly right, Ruthie. Being there is the most important thing. They reached their apartment as the streetlights flickered on. At the door, Cole paused and looked up at the sky, at the first stars appearing. He thought about everything that had brought him here. The battles, the losses, the choices, the life he had built from the ashes of the one he had lost. Daddy, Ruthie tugged his hand. Are you coming? Cole looked down at her, at the trust and love in her eyes. Yeah, sweetheart, I'm coming. He opened the door and they walked inside together. Later that night, after dinner and homework and bedtime stories, Ruthie was almost asleep when she murmured one last question. Daddy, tomorrow, do you have to go to work? Cole stroked her hair. Yes, honey, but I'll be home for dinner, I promise. She smiled sleepily. Good, because you're my favorite superhero, and superheroes should always come home. Cole kissed her forehead. I'll always come home, Ruthie. Always. He turned off the light and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her sleep. On the wall, among all the drawings, was the newest one. 3 figures, a salute, and the words that said everything. My dad is a superhero, and now everyone knows. Cole smiled and closed the door softly. In the living room, the dog tags sat on the coffee table, catching the lamplight. He picked them up, feeling their weight, remembering the desert and the promise, and the 12 years between then and now. Then he set them down beside Ruthie's drawing and went to prepare her lunch for tomorrow. The routine beginning again, the same as always, and yet, somehow, completely different. Never laugh at the quietest person in the room. They might be the only one who knows how to save your life. And sometimes, the greatest heroes aren't the ones who fight the biggest battles. They're the ones who come home every night, make dinner for their children, and ask, "How was your day, sweetheart?"